Hello, everybody. My name is William Porter. Welcome to this edition of Storytelling Time. This program is brought to you by Everett Black Entrepreneur Network. And we're so happy to have with us today Lou Everett and Sherry McManus of the Lou Everett Group. So good to have you all with us today. Again, I believe this is our third interview session. If you remember, we've done two other sessions in the past. So. Now, we're going to be here talking about personal development, and especially as it relates to entrepreneurs, but also personal development in the general sense, because that affects us as business people. Mm-hmm. But first of all, tell us what you do. For those of our viewers who don't know what you do professionally.
Sure. You want to take that one?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you again, Dr. Porter. It's always been a blast coming on here and really giving some great value to your audience, which we love. So for those of you that do not know us, I'm Sherry and this is Lou. We are the husband and wife duo of the Lou Everett Group, mm-hmm. and we are business and executive leadership coaches and corporate trainers. And we help small businesses, owners and professionals to achieve and really aspire over 500% growth in their business and professional lives through our proprietary coaching system. So we absolutely love transforming today's leaders. So that is us in a nutshell.
Yep, I agree.
We certainly need leadership today in a number of ways. Yes. Of course, I think it was about the end of October, the beginning of November, you ended your mastermind series mm-hmm. on personal development. I'm sure mm-hmm. you remember that. And it spanned over 8 weeks, I believe. And I believe I attended maybe 5 or 6 of those 8 sessions. And they were very informative, very helpful. And of course, the basis that you used was John Maxwell's book. And I have a copy right here, John Maxwell's, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth. Mm-hmm. So, and you can see these, you can see 6 of these on your screen. We'll go over 6 of these in this first session. But I want to touch on now the first law, and that is the law of intentionality. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, why did he place this law at number 1? Why did he start with the law of intentionality? It's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Dr. Porter. And first, again, thank you for having us. It's always fun being with you and being with like-minded people. But the interesting thing about this book is that there is kind of a backstory to this book on when things were placed, as far as the laws were placed, because there was there was like an original format, and then there was a workbook put in it. John put it into place, and then he changed the order of the chapters based upon what made sense. And there actually is no pun intended, an intentional reason why John put the law of intentionality in its place where it is first, because awareness is important, which is the second one, but intentionality is because we have to go after anything with that intention, with a specific purpose in mind. That's really the reason. So it starts off with purpose. I believe that is a reason why John would have put that first.
Well, being intentional is certainly important as far as getting started. Mm-hmm. And based on what I read in his book, I got a lot from him saying that, at least in my estimation, you have to be intentional in order to start whatever you're trying to do. Would you agree with that?
100%.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
100%. It goes kind of in line with the law of diminishing intent that I believe is mentioned in the law of intentionality, which is a concept that was originated by Jim Rohn, I believe. That states the longer that you wait to do something that you should do now, the greater the odds that you will never actually do it. So just by saying, what do we have every year, right? January comes along and we have everyone has the good intention or intent to put in place their New Year's resolution. But the reality of it is most don't, because they actually put off something that they should have actually already started. So they never get a chance to actually begin.
Well, it's very interesting to me that the longer you do put off something that you know you should do, and according to the author of this quote, chances are, as you indicated, you will not do it. And I have my own thoughts about the reason why that's the case. But anyway, at some point we have to get started. And once we get started, and as you indicated, a part of getting started is being aware of the fact that you should get started, which brings us to the second law that Maxwell talks about, and that is the law of awareness. So could you take a minute or two, three, however long you think you should take to explain to our viewers and listeners the law of awareness that John Maxwell talks about and how it relates to personal development? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to take the law of awareness?
Yeah, I can start it. Definitely, it's one of my favorite chapters. They're all good, but one of my favorite is the law of awareness, because we don't know what we don't know, right? And in order to, intentionality is one, but then it's the awareness. Like, what do we need to know? What questions do we have to know? And this chapter really hits home a lot of the gaps, right? I love talking about the different types of gaps, the growth gaps in particular that we all go through, and we can really relate once we dive into that, of like, oh, you're right, I don't do that, or I do that, or it's very, I can't describe it. It's just very, very basic. It seems very basic. It's like, this book in particular, there's nothing in it that is going to be like, oh, I think I've heard of that before. This type of book is the type of book that it's very common sense, I guess, is the bottom line, to really just take it in and admire that. So the awareness is really just, again, you don't know what you don't know until you start really dissecting what the different growth gaps are. And now that you're aware of those growth gaps, what can you do about it? And this is a great plan to start.
You've got to know yourself before you can know other people, and before you can know anything else. So it all begins there. And so the law of awareness is certainly a great place to start. And I know why John probably battled with which one to put first, but it makes perfect sense. We need to be intentional about getting to know who we are, so that we then in turn can dissect that, find out what we don't know so that we can learn that. So then we can in turn move on to the next law to be able to provide an additional layer of growth in our development.
But this is why you guys are so important, because you make people aware of some of these principles, very valuable principles that, if implemented, it can really help them a whole lot as far as their personal development. But you have to be aware of these things first. I guess sometimes people adhere to some of these principles, I guess, without even knowing it. But I think it's much better to, as we just indicated with the first law, be intentional about it and know that you're utilizing awareness and intentionality and some of the other strategies that we'll get to. Makes them much more effective as far as the implementation of those.
Yeah, it sure does. I mean, there's a statistic that shows that we influence as people. We unintentionally influence about 10,000 people in our lifetime. That's doing it unintentionally, without doing it for any reason. We influence over 10,000 people. Now, imagine the impact we could have if we intentionally, on purpose, influence people in a way. See, that's just an example of how being intentional can make a huge difference.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, one of the things I got from this chapter, and he brings it out in a couple of sections, and that is being intentional about your passion. And we all have a passion. And what I got from this particular chapter, the way Maxwell presented it, is that we're all good at something. And, well, even more than that, we're all like being good at whatever it is that we're good at. You have to like it. When I was coming up, I played basketball a lot, and I wanted to become a professional basketball player. Well, I liked it, but it wasn't very practical because I didn't have the skills to do that. But there were other things that I could do that I found out ultimately that I had a passion for, that I liked just as well as playing basketball. And an example of that is teaching, for example. What do you think about that? Someone finding their passion at some point along the line and then developing that passion and being aware of that passion, first of all.
Absolutely. I mean, when you find your true passion, your true purpose, and why you have those things, that's what we call your North Star. That is what guides you really in anything that you do. So identifying what that is, you made a good point, is be sure that passion is something that you're good at or can get good at, and you're willing to invest in the time and energy to be good at it because you love it, right? Just like you said with basketball. With me, it was with music. I was a musician. I love playing music. I play guitar, and I'm a vocalist. I love it, and I'm okay at it. But I was never going to be a rock star because I wasn't willing to invest in the time and energy to be a rock star, because that's just not was what I was willing to do, and my passion was elsewhere. So that is absolutely true, what you say.
I know you all are faith people, and a lot of this has to do with so-called God-given talent. In other words, we're all born with a talent, something that we're good at. It's just a matter of finding out what that talent is. And the earlier we find out, the better. Yeah. Preferably when we're young, 4, 5, 6 years old.
Ideally.
And I can point to a number of examples of the Williams sisters in tennis. Of course, Tiger Woods just came back on the scene in golf with his son, by the way, and him being taught what he knows. There are a lot of other examples, I'm sure, about that. Mm-hmm. And you, Lou, you indicated that at an early age, you began to develop your talents, didn't you? As far as public speaking.
Right. Yes. As far as public speaking goes, and something that I was always very passionate about in teaching and helping other people. And that started at a young age. Sherry even actually did too, which is pretty awesome. But and I think I like what you're saying here, and you're right. I believe that I call that a calling, right? I think we're all called. All right. God has called us to something. We all have a purpose, and that purpose, most of the time, if not all the time, is bigger than we are, bigger than we think we are. Right. It is something that has a place in our life. And many times it does take us some time to really, I don't necessarily say identify what that calling is, because it's always been there. It's a matter of perhaps being found in the calling, realizing, man, I should have just stuck with this for forever from the beginning. But we have to be honed in our craft. And that's the beauty of how callings work. We are honed and trained and guided and manipulated and made sharpened throughout our life and our experiences to when the time does come, when we can then begin to see the value of what our craft really is and what our calling is, then we'll be able to make a bigger impact than we would have had if we would have pushed it harder too early.
Okay. Well, Lou and Sherry, we're going to go ahead and take our first break. And when we come back, we'll delve into the third and the fourth laws of development, personal development that Maxwell puts forward. And so we'll take it from there. So we'll be back in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're here with Lou Everett and Sherry McManus of the Lou Everett Group. I indicated before we took a break, Lou and Sherry, that I wanted to get into the third and the fourth strategies of Maxwell. The third one is the law of mirror. believe it is, the law of mirror. And the fourth one is the law of reflection. And the reason why I put these together is that at first, I thought before getting to the law of reflection, I thought about a mirror, and what a mirror does, at least in my estimation, you have a reflection of yourself. And then when I finally got to the fourth law of reflection, Maxwell separates the two. And so I was kind of interested in that. So maybe one way we can deal with these two particular laws is to make a distinction between the law of the mirror and the law of reflection. How off base was I to think of a mirror as being a reflection of myself?
Yeah, that's a really good perspective too, because like it, when you first read it, you think of that. You're like, well, mirror. You're looking at your mirror, and it's the reflection. So, it's a really good perspective, and I think Lou's got a really good way of describing the two. With that.
Yeah, I think that it's and I love the fact that you put these together.
Yeah.
Because there's a reason behind that. Because you think of it a mirror, you think, oh well, I'm looking in a mirror, I'm seeing a reflection of who I am, which is true, which is exactly what the law of the mirror really does represent. It is, who am I, and how can I use that to begin to impact and influence other people? Looking at who we are first, right? Matter of fact, you have to see value in yourself in order to add value to other people, right? That's the whole purpose of this law. So we've got to be able to see what that value is by looking in the mirror. What do you see? Which falls right in line with that law of awareness and knowing what our calling is, right? What it is that we're good at. Reflection, on the other hand, is not really a mirror reflection, even though it does correlate and ring a bell. It's more of, okay, now that I am aware that I have value and that I need to add value to other people and how I can perhaps do that. Now, as I begin intentionally, the law of intentionality, because now I'm aware of this, the law of intentionality, I go back and now I say, okay, every day, how do I intentionally now use my value to add value to other people? And I reflect on that. Not a reflection in a mirror, but a reflection in our behavior, reflection in our action. What are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's not working? How are we adding value to people? What can we do better tomorrow to add value to people? So that's the difference and variation of the law of the mirror and the law of reflection. They do relate, but they're different in that we're reflecting internally as opposed to an external view of ourselves in a mirror.
Well, you mentioned that you're talking about how we can add value not only to yourself, but how can we add value to others. And it reminds me, actually, we go to the end of the laws that Maxwell talks about, the law of contribution. That's basically, and of course, we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But the point is that all of these laws intertwine and interrelate. And it's very subtle sometimes, the differences between these
very,
laws.
very true.
And he mentions character a lot too.
A lot.
So these beginning chapters are about character building and character traits. So that's weaved into as well, which I think was really eye-opening when I first read this book of, oh, that's how you build character. Or just putting a name to the process was I thought, for me, it was eye-opening.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Well, one word that I put to this idea of reflection that I got out of that particular chapter of Maxwell is experience. And he quotes a person, and if I can get this person's name correct, he quotes actually it's Julius Caesar, who we all know. But anyway, he says that Julius Caesar said way back, if you remember your English lit class back in high school.
You should definitely know that.
Experience is the teacher of all things, according to what Julius Caesar says way back.
Yeah.
So that's what I got from reflection, that through experience, we can learn a lot, not only experience from ourselves and our history, our past experiences, but also experiences of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. Because those experiences that we encounter with other people can certainly shape who we are,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what kind of value we see in ourselves, or and a bunch of things, right? Which will bring us into some of these other laws later on, like the law of pain, perhaps. But that's absolutely right. Those experiences is what shapes us and develops us into what direction we actually go and follow in everything that we do. And by using that law of reflection, we get to see what those experiences really are. So we don't lose out on what those little experiences might actually tell us.
That's great. That's great. Well, we're going to take another small break, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to get very close to finishing things up for this particular session. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're here with Lou Everett and Sherry McManus of the Lou Everett Group. And I might add that the Lou Everett Group is based out of the Raleigh, North Carolina area, the Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina area, Research Triangle. And if you will get your contact information in just a minute for anybody who would like to have further insight on some of these strategies that we're talking about. But let's move on to the fifth law, and you touched upon the fifth law earlier before we left, and that is, if I'm not mistaken, well, maybe you didn't, but anyway, the fifth law of Maxwell is the law of consistency.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about the law of consistency. How is that important to our personal development?
Well, I mean, if you look at the laws we've covered so far, right, being intentional about where it is that we are, because growth doesn't just happen. The law of awareness, where you must know yourself to grow yourself, right? So you got to know who you are, be able to see value in yourself, and then reflect on what you're learning and those experiences. But you need to do this consistently, right? Motivation gets you going, as John Maxwell says, but discipline keeps you growing. Right. So that consistency, not just being motivated, but discipline and doing it over and over and over again on a consistent basis is what causes continual growth.
Well, actually, we could connect the fifth law of Maxwell to the sixth law of Maxwell, because in order to be consistent, I would think that you would have to be in a favorable environment. And even if you're not, maybe you can utilize some of these other strategies to make up for not being in a favorable environment. As you indicated, we'll get to the law of pain later. Mm-hmm. But certainly consistency is very important, doing things the same, well, maybe not the same way, but being consistent in your behavior as far as getting things done is very, very important. But moving on to the environment, this is Maxwell's sixth law, the environment. And so tell us about the environment. Obviously, the environment is extremely important. And where we are, where we make our nest, so to speak, because we're all influenced by other people, whether we know it or not, or whether we like it or not. We're influenced by others. Maybe we shouldn't be as much, but we are. So tell us about this sixth law of Maxwell, the environment.
Yeah, so the sixth law for the law of environment is really about where growth thrives in a really good, conducive environment. So that's the short version. But let's do a visual aid. And we love discussing about a plant. So plants are perfect for personal growth analogies, because think of the soil that you have to put it in, right? And over time, yes, you have to water it, you got to fertilize it. But over time, sometimes that soil can become toxic. Something about it, maybe the roots aren't growing right, something is off. It could have gotten an infection of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can interpret that even as our own environment. So that's the beauty about a plant, to really visualize that. A healthy plant grows in healthy soil.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're doing internally for yourself through personal development is giving yourself that healthy soil so you can grow and become the fruit of whatever your talent may be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you don't have that, which sometimes, your listeners, there may be listeners here that are like, well, I live in a really, really very maybe toxic environment, whatever that may be. But there's still some healthy soil within it.
Mm-hmm.
That goes back to awareness, and it goes back to intentionality. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I love that phrase because it really is. When there's a will, there's a way.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to pull yourself out from a toxic soil environment and put yourself back into a healthier environment with that healthier soil fertilization. Who you put yourself around is a key component that we talk about quite frequently. So we can, talk more about that, but I love the plant analogy because I think that's the simplest and a great vision to really understand for this particular topic. Do you agree?
Yeah, another twist to the law of environment that I'd like to that I like to hone in on, that when we teach this, that isn't necessarily pulled out, is mentioned in the book in detail, but we have to look at our internal environment too. Okay, we have an internal component to us as people, as humans, that have been given to us, that many times that environment within us can become toxic, can become soiled in a way that we have that has impacted our growth. So being aware of that, we've got to try to come up and find ways or connect with people like us, like you, Dr. Porter, that can help them become and find ways to change that current situation or environment into something that's more conducive to positive growth.
Well, that's certainly true, but I don't have to tell you that that's sometimes very challenging to do, especially in the environment that we live in, this pandemic environment that we live in. We cannot, for example, come together as entrepreneurs like we did during the pre-pandemic age, prior to March 2020, I believe. The good old days. Have you heard of that expression?
True, but I think now it's just different.
Right.
If you think about it. So, yes, we can't maybe physically get together. However, now with being virtual, I mean, look what we're doing. So, like I said, it all goes back to where there's a will, there's a way. And then again, awareness and intentionality really comes into play, because we can be in our own, negativity and our thought process and into our own heads. Oh, but we can't because of this or because of that. If it's not the pandemic, it'll be something else.
That's right.
Those are excuses. There's people that we have tons of stories that we share for people that have been in the depths of some really negative situations internally and externally, and they have turned around and have made remarkable strides because they have the will, determination, and the right people to get them out to be in a better spot.
Yep.
So that's something to think about, It's
definitely challenging. It's not easy.
Yeah,
it's not easy when the environment around you it feels as if it's coming and closing in, right? It's not easy. But the challenge is first of all, nobody should have ever said it was easy anyway. If anyone's told you that the life and change and disaster is easy, then you might want to refine different friends, because they're the wrong ones for you. But the reality of it is, nothing of value comes out of easiness. Anything, even when you look at a plant, go back to the plant analogy, it's a seed, but within that little seed, it already exists. Is this amazing plant or this tree, the branches, the leaves, the fruit already exist in this little seed, that all we need to do is place it and nurture it and put it in the right environment by intentionally providing it the necessary feed at the right moment in time, consistently in the right environment to be able to grow and develop into what it is. We are the only living species on this planet as human beings that stunt our own growth on purpose. We are the only living being that does that. Trees, plants, animals, they don't stunt their own growth. We end up doing that, or the environment does. But humans, we're the first ones that'll come and degrade ourselves, degrade other people, try to eliminate people's growth. We are the only living being that does it. That should tell us something. That tells us that we need to change something. And these laws provide us the awareness to do that.
But at the same time, Lou, we have something that plants and some of these other creations don't have, and that is the potential.
That's right.
To move even further. So
exactly.
That's the exciting part.
Exactly.
Well, we're coming to the close of this first session, and I'd like to ask you one other question. The Storytelling Time program, to some extent, is involved with trying to encourage those individuals who would like to write. That is, like in writing a book, to do that. And I can think of no better way than to have them take advantage of some of these strategies that we've been talking about. So I'd like to ask you, as we get ready to close, how can someone who might have an interest in writing a book utilize intentionality and awareness and consistency and the environment and all these other things we've been talking about specifically? And of course, we'll get to other items later in future programs.
No, it's good. First of all, when it comes down to it, it's kind of skip the line and really focus on, when it comes down to any skill set, look at the law of the mirror and the law of reflection. Realize that there is, if you have this passion and you have this desire, there's nothing externally in your environment that should in any way pull you away from that passion unless you allow it to. If we can pull anything away from these laws that we've covered, is that if there's nothing in any of these laws that says, well, this is nice, but you don't have any control over it. None of this says that. What these are alluding to is you have complete control over it. This is what we call an empowered future. Regardless of what's happened last year or the year before that or whenever it might be, the fact of the matter is that we are not victims of our future. We're victims of our past sometimes. So you can't say, well, I can't be a great writer because, the future treated me terrible. No, because it hasn't happened yet, right? Only if you allow it to. So remember that you can create that empowered future. You have the ability to do that. These laws are put in place, have been written by John to show you that, obviously. And as you had mentioned, we are very strong faith believers, and we believe, obviously, that we have been given an innate humanness about us that gives us the strength necessary to do these things. Use it. Use it. Not easy, but it's worth it, and it's very doable.
In other words, not only if you want to become an author, but if you want to be successful in any endeavor, you can do it by implementing these laws. Yes, well, thank you a lot, Lou and Sherry. It's been grand being with you today. And I'd like to let our viewers and listeners know that you all will be with us again next time. And we certainly look forward to that. But give us your contact information so that if anybody would like to get in contact with you, they can.
Absolutely. So we are on LinkedIn as well as Facebook and Instagram, and our website is LouEverettGroup.com. We have a phone number there, and yes, we pick up the phone, and we even have our calendar out there. So feel free to reach out and let's have a conversation. See where you're at. If you have your passion and you need some guidance and vision and passion, that's up our alley. We'll love to have a conversation with you.
Great. And that information should be on your screen, anyone who would love to do that. And I can attest that Lou and Sherry are very easy to work with and very personable, I might add.
Thank you.
So you won't regret it at all. So anyway, I'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for being with us today. And as I always say, if you are going through something that is either good or bad, doesn't matter. Just keep in mind that there's always more good things coming your way. And we'll be seeing you next time.